I don't come into any fight with any other mindset than to just kick it.
Brock Lesnar has always been the kind of man who speaks his mind. No filters, no sugarcoating, just raw truth. But that same blunt honesty is now shining a light on a dark reality about Hulk Hogan. According to Lesnar, the man fans once worshipped as the ultimate American hero isn't the person they believed him to be. Behind the curtain, Hogan has been involved in some of the dirtiest political games in WWE history. And now, the evidence of those actions is finally coming to light. Let's break it down. Lesnar's silent yet powerful stance has sent shockwaves through the wrestling world, the same man who once boldly declared,
I really don't like people. I'm sorry, I don't.
Brock Lesnar would become the unexpected spokesperson for an entire generation of wrestlers who had grown tired of Hulk Hogan's grip on professional wrestling. To understand the weight of what Lesnar stood for, we first need to look at the world he walked into. Hulk Hogan's career had changed wrestling forever, transforming it from small regional shows into a global entertainment empire during the 1980s Hulkamania era. His larger-than-life image, with the red and yellow gear, bandana, mustache, and catchphrases like "brother," turned him into a cultural icon. But behind the scenes, that same success created resentment among wrestlers, fans, and insiders who saw Hogan's ego-driven behavior put personal gain ahead of the industry's well-being. The difference between Hogan and Lesnar could not have been more clear. Hogan built his empire on charisma and political power, while Lesnar represented something else entirely: pure authenticity. With his trademark bluntness, Lesnar never played a character designed to sell toys or manipulate the crowd. He was a real fighter, one who had conquered every mountain in front of him. His achievements spoke for themselves. NCAA Division I heavyweight wrestling champion, the youngest WWE champion at the time, and a UFC heavyweight champion. A trifecta of accomplishments no one else in wrestling could claim. And more importantly, these weren't favors handed down by backstage politics. They were earned through blood, sweat, and sheer physical dominance. The first glimpse of these clashing philosophies came on August 8, 2002, during SmackDown. Lesnar faced Hogan in what was supposed to be a warm-up before his match with The Rock. But what happened that night became symbolic. Lesnar manhandled Hogan from the start, shoving him across the ring and even ripping off his bandana. Hogan fought back with his signature Hulk-up moments, but it wasn't enough. Lesnar made him pass out with a crushing bear hug, winning by technical submission. Then came the brutal message, a steel chair to Hogan's head, leaving him bloodied and broken. This wasn't just a scripted match, it was a statement. A real athlete was tearing down the mythology of wrestling's biggest manufactured hero. Fans loved it. Many noted how Hogan's size even made Lesnar look human despite his dominance. But Lesnar's truest feelings toward Hogan would surface years later, in a moment that shook the industry. On August 11, 2014, during Hogan's 61st birthday celebration on Raw, legends filled the ring to honor him. But when Lesnar and his advocate, Paul Heyman, entered, everything changed. Lesnar circled the legends before locking eyes on Hogan and growling, "Party's over, Grandpa!" Heyman piled on with mockery, asking, "What you gonna do, Hulkster?" Reports later confirmed the line was unscripted, and Hogan was furious backstage. John Cena even had to step in and calm him down. That single moment became more than an insult. It was the voice of years of frustration from wrestlers tired of Hogan's politics. "Party's over, Grandpa" wasn't just a jab. It was a generational declaration that the era of manipulation was finally ending. To see why it hit so hard, you need to revisit Hogan's legacy. In 1986, before WrestleMania 2, Jesse Ventura tried to unionize wrestlers for better pay, health care, and protections. Hogan secretly told Vince McMahon, sabotaging the effort. At WrestleMania 3, Hogan earned more money alone than the rest of the roster combined, including Andre the Giant. This betrayal, later revealed in McMahon's 1994 trial, drove Ventura out and left decades of bitterness. Wrestlers paid the price while Hogan benefited, with no safety nets for their futures. This is where Lesnar stood, apart. No fake promises, no overplayed brotherhood speeches, no crowd manipulation. He spoke with blunt honesty about his goals, and every aspect of his career reflected it. Where Hogan's promos were about catchphrases and superhero comebacks, Lesnar's interviews were raw truth. He didn't need to pretend. He didn't need to play a role. Lesnar was authenticity in its purest form, and his existence alone was a rejection of everything Hulk Hogan had stood for. He explained when asked about how he mentally prepared for his opponents and went on to dismiss the fake drama that often drives sports entertainment, while his powerful presence inside the wrestling ring constantly reminded people of what real, athletic success looks like. Joe Rogan and Hulk Hogan even talked about his amazing physical abilities during a podcast, with Rogan pointing out that at the NFL Combine, Lesnar ran a 40-yard dash in 4.7 seconds at 283 pounds, jumped 35 inches vertically, and completed 30 reps of 225 pounds on the bench press. Rogan explained this while talking about Lesnar's journey from professional wrestling to becoming UFC heavyweight champion, calling him a monster, brother, and Hogan himself admitted it, which was important because it showed a rare, honest moment, where Hogan recognized the difference between his own created image and Lesnar's real athletic ability. While Hogan built his career on the illusion of superhuman strength and stamina, Lesnar actually had those superhuman abilities proven in the toughest competitive arenas, what could be called the politics of destruction. The deeper we look into the connection between Brock Lesnar and Hulk Hogan, the clearer it becomes that their rivalry was much more than a simple clash between two generations. It was really a battle between two completely different ideas of what professional wrestling should be and what kind of person deserves success in it. Hogan's way of handling wrestling was often described by other wrestlers as ruthless political maneuvering, with his creative control and backstage influence leading to decisions that served his own benefit rather than the long-term health of the business. One of the worst examples was the finger poke of doom in WCW in 1999, where Hogan and Kevin Nash faked a fight that insulted fans and played a role in WCW's downfall. But even more harmful was Hogan's ongoing refusal to lose cleanly to younger talent, the most famous case being the failed finish of his match with Sting at WCW Starrcade 1997, where he refused a clean loss and forced a restart after a supposed fast count. This wasn't only about ego, it was a deliberate breaking of wrestling's storytelling tradition, where older stars eventually passed the torch to the next generation, and both Steve Austin and Mick Foley accused Hogan of refusing to lift up younger wrestlers, with Austin even avoiding matches with him to protect his own career from being damaged by Hogan's backstage games. These actions weren't rare, they were part of a long pattern that followed Hogan throughout his career, and the difference compared to Lesnar could not have been more clear. When Lesnar came back to WWE in 2012, he didn't demand creative control or special treatment. Instead, he did what Hogan almost never did. He let himself be shown as a true threat to the system without using politics, and he made it clear that he believed success should be based on ability, not manipulation. This mindset was also seen in how Lesnar allowed others to look strong in wins or losses, and his match with The Undertaker at WrestleMania 30, where he ended the streak, was a choice made to serve the long-term story rather than short-term politics, because Lesnar understood his job was to raise the value of the whole product, even if he had to lose or make others look better. The results of this attitude were clear in how other wrestlers reacted to working with each man, and The Undertaker himself said in an interview that he was concerned about the return of the NWO to WWE, calling it a danger to the locker room filled with egos that were too big. While The Undertaker was directly talking about the NWO, the larger meaning of his words showed a common concern about wrestlers who cared more about their own rise than the overall success of the industry, and this point connected strongly to Hogan's influence during his different runs in various promotions. Lesnar's way of dealing with politics was completely different because it came from his proven ability inside the ring rather than from creating artificial power behind the scenes. He explained his belief that wrestling should be seen as real competition rather than just scripted entertainment, and this outlook allowed him to stay true to himself while keeping his credibility intact. The way the wrestling world reacted to these two very different approaches was telling, because while Hogan was often caught in controversies and backstage drama, Lesnar's reputation stayed solid even among wrestlers who might have had reasons to dislike his success. Part of this came from Lesnar's ability to admit that wrestling outcomes were planned, while still proving himself as a real competitor through his athletic background. But Hogan's biggest weakness was exposed through his long history of exaggerations and lies that slowly destroyed trust in him across the industry. These included wild stories like wrestling 400 days a year because of time zones, being scouted by Major League Baseball, turning down the George Foreman grill, and even claiming to party with John Belushi after WrestleMania 2, despite Belushi having died in 1982. The most embarrassing lie connected to Lesnar was Hogan's repeated claim that he was the first man to face Lesnar after his 2012 WWE return from UFC, even though Lesnar's actual first match was against John Cena at Extreme Rules 2012, and Hogan wasn't even working for WWE at that time. He repeated this false claim several times, including on Joe Rogan's podcast in 2023 and again in a 2025 TMZ interview, which led to heavy mockery across Reddit and social media. What made these lies especially damaging was that they showed Hogan's constant need to insert himself into the achievements of others long after his own career had ended, while Lesnar's way of responding to such things was simple and direct, never wasting time on public arguments but instead letting his actions speak for themselves. Unlike Hogan, who had a reputation for using his backstage influence to protect his spot and hurt others, Lesnar treated his career with practical professionalism, knowing his worth and negotiating smartly, but without the destructive games that Hogan was known for. The clearest part of Lesnar's outlook was his blunt honesty about the reality of wrestling, as he openly explained the balance between athletic talent, scripted outcomes, and entertainment value, which stood in complete contrast to Hogan's habit of building myths about himself with stories of training, prayers, and vitamins. The political meaning behind this honesty was huge, because by rejecting the old myths Hogan relied on, Lesnar pushed for a new kind of wrestling based on real athletic achievement and transparent business, not manipulation and drama. This difference was most clear in how each man handled career changes, with Hogan's exits from promotions usually ending in lawsuits, broken relationships, and bitterness, his WCW run ending with the company collapsing under political chaos, and his TNA run filled with controversies that damaged the brand, while Lesnar's moves were built on respect and professionalism. When he left WWE for UFC in 2004, he was direct and fair. And even though he criticized WWE's system in his book Death Clutch, he focused on the structure of the business instead of personal attacks, which kept his reputation strong and made his 2012 return a welcome event for both fans and the company. In the end, Lesnar never had to prove Hogan's flaws with interviews or books, because the most powerful statement was simply that he was everything Hogan pretended to be, but without the personal failures that shaped Hogan's legacy. The darkest revelation came in Hogan's 2015 racism scandal, when leaked audio from a 2007 tape exposed him making repeated racist remarks, including saying he was racist to a point while complaining about his daughter Brooke dating a black man, and these comments led to WWE immediately firing him on July 24, 2015, removing his Hall of Fame spot and pulling all merchandise. The gap between Hogan's image as a patriotic role model and his private words filled with prejudice could not have been wider, and in contrast, Lesnar avoided such scandals entirely by simply not creating them. This difference was summed up in a candid exchange when Stone Cold Steve Austin once asked him in an interview, "What do you mean you don't like people?" Showing how even in his bluntness, Lesnar's honesty carried more weight than Hogan's carefully crafted but ultimately hollow image. Lesnar answered with his usual honesty, and this open admission revealed something important about who he really was, because even when the truth might seem uncomfortable or unflattering, he remained completely genuine. Unlike Hogan, who carefully built a public image to maximize his popularity and marketability, Lesnar showed himself exactly as he was, an intensely private and somewhat antisocial athlete who just happened to be exceptionally gifted in combat sports. Lesnar explained in a way that showed he understood himself and chose to live according to his own nature rather than what others wanted or expected from him, and this honesty carried into every part of how he presented himself professionally. When asked about his reasons for coming back to WWE, he gave a brutally straightforward answer, making no effort to soften the message or shape it for a family-friendly audience. The weight of this honesty becomes even clearer when compared to Hogan's style of public relations, because Hogan spent his career building the image of a role model for kids, preaching about training, prayers, and vitamins, all while living a private life that contradicted those values. His admission of steroid use during Vince McMahon's 1994 trial, after years of denials, was one of many moments where the truth clashed with the image he had carefully built. The real difference between these two men showed most clearly in how they handled success and failure. When Lesnar was diagnosed with diverticulitis and forced to step away from UFC, he spoke openly about his health problems and their effect on his career, never trying to hide their seriousness or create false stories to protect himself. Hogan, by contrast, reacted to his own scandals in predictable fashion, especially during the racism controversy, where he tried to explain away his comments by blaming his upbringing and asking for forgiveness while still trying to hold on to his place in the industry. This pattern ran through his entire career, a cycle of deflecting, minimizing, and controlling the story instead of accepting blame with real accountability. The wrestling world's reaction to these differences was powerful. Many black wrestlers, including Mark Henry, Booker T, and JTG, spoke openly about their pain and doubt over Hogan's sincerity after his racist remarks, while Lesnar continued to earn respect across racial and generational lines. This wasn't because Lesnar was diplomatic or careful with his words. In fact, it was often the opposite. But his blunt honesty, even when uncomfortable, was seen as better than the hollow personas that eventually revealed hypocrisy. When Hogan passed away from cardiac arrest at age 71 in July 2025, the media coverage of his death showed how far his reputation had fallen, with obituaries giving as much attention to his scandals as his achievements, a sign of how deeply his image had been damaged over time. The larger lesson in Lesnar's quiet critique of Hogan reaches far beyond the two men themselves, because what Lesnar proved was that true athletic achievement and a real, authentic personality could succeed in the same spotlight where others had relied on backstage politics and manufactured drama. His presence alone challenged the very system that let figures like Hogan rise to power, and this point became even clearer in his dealings with other legends. When The Undertaker spoke about the NWO being like a cancer in the locker room and shared concerns about wrestlers who only cared about their own position, he was reflecting a wider truth that lined up with Lesnar's approach, a belief that wrestling worked best when performers raised the whole product instead of just themselves. The Undertaker explained this by outlining the kind of professional environment where someone like Lesnar could succeed, while those who relied on political games would struggle. The timing of these revelations and interactions shaped a powerful story about how professional wrestling itself was evolving, because as the industry grew and became more open about its scripted nature, performers like Hogan, who had built their legacies on manufactured myths, were left out of touch with what audiences and the business now demanded. Lesnar's path instead represented the future of wrestling, one where athletes capable of true competition at the highest level could still embrace and work within the entertainment side of the sport. He explained with his usual straightforwardness, breaking down his entire philosophy into just a few clear sentences, and this direct approach helped Lesnar face controversies and challenges that might have ended the careers of others built on weaker foundations. When questions came up about his focus on wrestling compared to his other pursuits, he answered honestly about his priorities instead of creating long stories to protect his image. The final judgment on what Lesnar revealed about Hogan is more damaging than any open accusation could have been, because simply by existing as a true athlete who stayed authentic while also achieving commercial success, Lesnar showed that everything Hogan claimed to stand for could be done without the lies, manipulation, and political maneuvering that shaped his career. The fact that Hogan kept lying about his history with Lesnar, inventing matches that never happened, and claiming credit for things he had no role in, only made him look like someone desperate to stay relevant in a business that had already moved past his kind of manufactured drama. The wrestling industry's response to both men's legacies completes the picture, because while Hogan's role in bringing wrestling to the mainstream can't be denied, the long-term harm caused by his behavior became clearer as the business grew. From Bret Hart to CM Punk, many wrestlers have openly criticized Hogan's selfishness and political games, leaving a record that directly contradicts the image he worked so hard to project. Lesnar's legacy, on the other hand, remains mostly untouched by the personal scandals and professional controversies that followed Hogan, and even wrestlers who don't fully agree with Lesnar's philosophy still respect his honesty and proven accomplishments. This difference in how the industry views them reflects the divide between performers who raise the business and those who use it for themselves. The impact of Lesnar's sharp 2014 remark about partying over grandpa takes on even greater meaning in this light, because it was more than just an insult. It was a symbolic passing of the torch, a generational shift delivered by someone who represented what the future of wrestling could be. Where Hogan stood for the old model of scripted drama and backstage politics, Lesnar stood for a new path built on real athletic performance and open professionalism. Most importantly, Lesnar showed that wrestlers could succeed at the highest levels without the moral compromises that defined so much of Hogan's career, proving that fans would support performers who stayed true to themselves. His ongoing career remains a model for how modern wrestlers can balance entertainment with authenticity, influencing a new generation that sees long-term success as requiring more than political power or fake narratives. The most devastating truth Brock Lesnar exposed about Hulk Hogan wasn't through a single comment or story, but through the living contrast of their careers, because by his actions alone, Lesnar proved that everything Hogan claimed to be could actually be achieved more powerfully through honesty, authenticity, and true athletic achievement. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to click on one of the boxes now on your screen to check out more content like this.